No one's taking it seriously. First signs of Yellowstone Titanic Eruption identified. Yellowstone volcano could end human life as we know it, but a science author claimed no one is taking this seriously after identifying the first steps of a Titanic eruption. Kindly support my Patreon account because YouTube has again demonetized my YouTube channel. The daily posts are 5 videos daily, and they are totally different from what I have on my YouTube channel. Thank you so much for your support and that you find all my content so interesting. You'll find the Patreon account details in the description box below. Yellowstone caldera is a supervolcano, one of the 20 some odd around the world. It's located in northwest Wyoming. It has a potential to cause untold devastation in the event of a super eruption, something that last happened 630,000 years ago. It's located in the states Wyoming, Montana, and Idaho, an area constantly monitored by USGS and Yellowstone Volcano Observatory for changes in the system. But after experts said the chances of another super eruption in our lifetime were close to 1 in a million, science writer Brian Walsh asks, why isn't anyone taking this problem more seriously? Because at this point in time, we have no way of stopping such an eruption. The author of A Brief Guide to the End of the World claimed unlikely is not the same thing as impossible, even though it's human nature to conflate the two. He says in an article promoting his book, Mr. Walsh said the possible catastrophe would be like nothing humanity's ever experienced. This is before he outlined what he believed would be the initial signs of the disaster. He writes, first would come increasingly intense earthquakes, the sign that magma beneath Yellowstone was rushing towards the surface to fill up the chamber, that is. We know that the chamber is above a huge magma reservoir, and this magma comes in all the way from Baja California. It runs along the fault line that goes underneath Salt Lake City, Utah, goes up to Wyoming to Yellowstone, then turns west and is found under Idaho. Now, when magma, he says, then the magma would burst through the ground in a titanic eruption, discharging the toxic innards of the earth into the air, as he explains. He said it would continue for days, burying Yellowstone in lava within a 40-mile radius. But the devastation around Yellowstone would be just the beginning, he says. Walsh went on to explain why he believed more Americans should be concerned about the possibility of this scenario unraveling. He said volcanologists believe the Yellowstone supervolcano would bury large swaths of Colorado, Wyoming, and Utah, and of course Idaho as well, in up to 3 feet of toxic volcanic ash. Depending, he says, on the weather patterns, much of the Midwest would receive a few inches as well, plunging the region into darkness. Even the coasts, where a majority of Americans live, would most likely see a dusting as the ash could spread. Crops would be destroyed, pasture land would be contaminated, power lines and electric transformers would be ruined, potentially knocking out much of the grid. Mr. Walsh claimed the devastation would not be restricted to the U.S. He said modeling by meteorologists found that the aerosols released could spread globally if the eruption occurred during the summer. Over the short term, he says, as the toxic cloud blocked sunlight, global average temperatures could plunge significantly and not return to normal for several years. Rainfall would decline sharply, he says. He says that might be enough to trigger a die-off of tropical rainforests. Farming could collapse, beginning with the Midwest. It would be the greatest catastrophe since the dawn of civilization. Now, the USGS estimates the probability of an eruption is 1 in 730,000 any given year, but Mr. Walsh believes existential risks like Yellowstone should be getting more attention and funding. He said in 2009, last year, aviation accidents around the world caused 556 deaths last year. The Federal Aviation Administration alone spends more than $7 billion a year on aviation safety, yet the U.S. spends only about $22 million annually on its volcano hazards program, even though supervolcanoes over the long term will kill far more people than plane crashes. He says the difference, of course, is that aviation poses a risk that is relatively constant and known, there will probably never be a year in which no one dies in an aviation accident, but there will be definitely never be a year in which 10% of global population dies in a single plane crash. Yet that could happen with a supervolcanic eruption, or an asteroid strike, or a nuclear war, he says. So Walsh concluded by stating that what has happened before can and will happen again eventually. He says that by ignoring the threat of a Yellowstone supereruption, we leave ourselves vulnerable. And again, this has to do with a supereruption, the kind that took place 630,000 years ago. Now, despite this, recent study suggests that the hotspot of Yellowstone could currently be in a state of decline. The findings were based on analysis of volcanic deposits that were scattered around tens of thousands of miles in the region. University of Leicester volcanologist Thomas Knott said, "We discovered that deposits previously believed to belong to multiple smaller eruptions were in fact colossal sheets of volcanic material from two previously unknown supereruptions at about 9 and 8.7 million years ago. The two supereruptions took place during the Miocene and bring supereruptions for the region in this area to 6, suggesting that the area experienced such eruptions on average of once every 500,000 years. So the new findings from University of Leicester in the UK said that the average of supereruptions of Yellowstone is every 500,000 years. By contrast, over the past 3 million years, the Yellowstone hotspot has seen just 2 supereruptions. Scientists believe this may indicate that the frequency of such events is slowing considerably. And End Times, a brief guide to the end of the world, is published by Hachette Books and is available to buy for anyone who's interested. This is by Callum Hoare on Express UK. Please leave your comments. Thank you.